A tense exchange erupts in Washington as Representative Pete Aguilar presses Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth over the Iran ceasefire, demanding answers on war costs, missing details, and who is actually in control of America's military decisions.
Mr. Hurst, on April 29th, as you indicated to the ranking member, you said that the Iran war had cost $25 billion in total. You reaffirmed that today. Do you have any other updated costs or projections since that testimony that you've given? Outside reporting estimates have indicated that the war costs could be $1 billion a day. Do you have anything to share?
Yeah, thanks for the question, sir. So at the time of testimony in front of the Ask, it was $25 billion. But the Joint Staff Team and the Comptroller Team are constantly looking at that estimate. And so now we think it's closer to 29. That's because of updated repair and replacement of equipment costs, and also just general operational costs to keep people in theater.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Secretary, when can you share more formal accounting on the cost of the war with Congress and with this committee?
We'll share what we can. I think we've updated on that number this morning, but when it's relevant and required, we will share it.
I think this would be the format that it would be required. Mr. Secretary, on that same day, April 29th, you testified that the current ceasefire meant that the 60-day calendar with the War Powers Resolution was paused. Who are the parties to the ceasefire?
Well, right now, we are in that same ceasefire as of right now.
That wasn't the question. Who are the parties to
It would be the United States and the regime in Iran.
How many pages is the ceasefire? What deal points? I'm not asking you to share the contents. I guess what I'm trying to ask is, how do we know that the ceasefire is active or not active without any documentation?
We know it's evident, and the ceasefire is in effect.
But is it pages? Is it 15 points? There's been different points that have moved around. Is there any other? How do we know you just trust that the president knows that the ceasefire is active or not active?
As you know, for the most part, a ceasefire means the fire is ceasing, and we know that has occurred while negotiations occur, and there are lots of different discussions with our negotiating team that are happening. I'm there when those discussions are occurring. Different drafts, different perspectives. So it's a very dynamic situation where a negotiated settlement could be the outcome here, where Iran does not have nuclear capabilities. And from the Department of War perspective, we're here to support those options.
On May 5th, you announced the launch of Project Freedom, which is a new exercise where CENTCOM will help coordinate ship traffic and guide commercial ships through the Strait. President Trump then announced the operation concluded that evening. Now it seems that we may be revisiting that. Can you give us the latest on Project Freedom?
Well, as it pertains to battlefield options, we don't disclose those types of things. But ultimately, as the president stated publicly in his truth, at the request of the Pakistanis and given the options in the negotiation, it was paused, and it's an option we could always recommence should the commander-in-chief want us to.
Is the theory to create more ceasefires or more projects just to evade the War Powers Act?
The theory of the entire case is to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. And if that has to be done kinetically and militarily, the Department of War is locked and loaded and ready to do that. If it happens through Project Freedom, where you move commerce through, if it happens through a negotiated deal, the president was very clear even yesterday. This is actually quite simple. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon one way or another, and we're here to support as one tool of the whole of government to make that happen.
General Kane, the depleted munitions have been a subject of some of the discussions that you've even heard here today. With respect to stockpiles that we have around the world, key regions like the Indo-Pacific and the Middle East, can you give us an update? What are you hearing from the combatant commands about their munitions status around the world?
Well, sir, we have sufficient munitions for what we're tasked to do right now. That's what I hear from the COCOMs. What I will say is I will always want more, so I appreciate the effort of this committee and the Congress. We're always going to want more munitions.
Secretary Hegseth, what are you doing to support the involved services to recap their losses?
We're submitting a $1.5 trillion budget that will remake the department and ensure that every warfighter in the future has exactly what they need, and we're never in a fair fight. And I take issue with the characterization that munitions are depleted in a public forum. That's not true. And ultimately, we have all the munitions needed to execute what we need to execute, and we're going to ensure that we supercharge that going into the future.
I think you've heard differences from both sides of the aisle on that point. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, gentlemen. This hearing captures a familiar but increasingly urgent theme in Washington. When war money, and executive power intersect, Congress often finds itself demanding clarity after decisions are already in motion. At the center of this exchange is Representative Pete Aguilar, who is pressing for answers about the financial and legal foundation of U.S. operations tied to Iran and an ongoing ceasefire arrangement. His line of questioning is direct. How much is this costing? Who is formally in agreement? And what exactly is Congress being asked to authorize or simply accept after the fact? The cost issue is where the conversation begins to sharpen. Military officials acknowledge that estimates for the conflict have risen from roughly $25 billion to nearly $29 billion due to operational expenses, equipment replacement, and sustained deployments. That number alone becomes politically significant, not just for its scale, but because it reinforces a broader concern in Congress. War spending tends to grow faster than oversight mechanisms can track it in real time. Aguilar's deeper concern, however, is not just cost, it's transparency. He challenges the administration on the ceasefire with Iran, specifically asking who the parties are, what the terms are, and whether Congress has any formal documentation to evaluate whether the ceasefire is legitimate or still active. That question exposes a core tension in U.S. foreign policy. Ceasefires are often fluid, diplomatic arrangements rather than fully codified agreements. But Congress still needs a legal and procedural basis to assess war powers compliance. Secretary Pete Hegseth responds by emphasizing that the ceasefire is active and operational, and that negotiations are ongoing. He frames the situation as dynamic, meaning conditions can shift quickly depending on diplomatic talks and regional developments. From his perspective, military leadership is working within that uncertainty while maintaining readiness and strategic flexibility. But Aguilar isn't satisfied with that level of explanation. His argument is essentially about accountability. If U.S. forces are operating under a ceasefire that is not clearly documented or formally structured in a way Congress can review, then oversight becomes reactive instead of preventive. The discussion then expands into Project Freedom, a coordinated military initiative tied to maritime operations and regional stability efforts.